Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of Macabre Matinee with Craig and Sean. As per usual, I am Craig Lance.
And I'm Sean, bearded Capolit.
Yeah, we want to give everyone kind of a heartfelt apology for missing last week. However, as you probably know, the area of the country we live in was hit with a huge snowstorm
Yeah, yeah.
that caused some pretty extensive damage to your home studio, right, Sean?
Unfortunately, the upstairs neighbor's pipe burst, flooding out
Yeah.
my recording office studio art room, and having to kind of like rush to get everything out of there. It took a little while for me to be able to get comfortable again in my own home, and the office is still not being used. I'm out in the living room having to
Oh, nice.
be a pain for my wife. Bless her with her patience. There might be stuff going on in the background. Well, that's just life because I'm not going to tell her to be quiet for an hour while we talk about slasher films.
Well, yeah,
So,
no doubt. And thanks, Vanetta, for being understanding.
no,
So,
well, she is awesome. So, yes.
yeah, uh, as much as we want to give an episode every week, there's just certain things that are just absolutely unavoidable. So,
Yep.
having said all of that, we are glad to be back this week
Oh,
and
yeah.
glad to bring you our thoughts and reviews on Friday the 13th, 2009, or the remake or reboot or whatever you want to call it.
Oh,
Uh,
it's many things, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. As far as what it's classified as, is actually pretty interesting.
oh, okay. So, time for our weekly spoiler warning. We cannot talk about this movie without spoiling it. So, if you haven't seen it, you don't want to be spoiled, this is your one and only chance. Press pause, go watch the movie. It's on HBO Max, so no excuses. And then come back and finish listening to our brilliant takes on it. So,
Always, as always, brilliant takes.
as as always, here we go.
Right.
Friday the 13th, 2009, or as I like to call it, not your daddy's Jason. Released in 2009, obviously, directed by Marcus Nispel, written by Damian Shannon, Mark Swift, and Mark Wheaton. And it's starring, they went with a little bit of star power in this one. They
A little
got
bit.
Jared Padalecki as
Yeah.
Clay. And if you don't know where Jared's from, go hit yourself in the head because you haven't been paying attention to pop culture over the past 20 years.
Right.
Um, Danielle Panabaker is Jenna, and you might recognize her as Killer Frost from the Flash TV show. Uh,
Okay. Yeah, I didn't look into the cast, but yeah, she did look familiar. That's why. Okay. Even I
and
learned something.
then, yeah. And then Amanda Rigetti played Whitney, and she was on the show Mentalist. That's kind of the latest place you would know her from.
Hmm.
Travis Van Winkle plays Trent, and he also played Trent in Transformers. No word if it's the same character or not, but
Well, yeah, it's like an asshole, and this is produced by Michael Bay, so
yeah,
I think I'm in my head now. That's officially canon.
yeah. Friday the 13th is officially in Transformers canon now.
At least this one is.
Yeah. And Derek Mears plays Jason because I am sure that Kane Hodder read the script and said, nah, this ain't my Jason. Of course, I'm kidding.
Hashtag not my Jason.
So the movie starts off with a flashback to 1980 and a retelling of what we know to be the end of the original Friday the 13th, except with new casting. The
Yeah.
twist is this time a young Jason is watching from the woods as his mother gets her head chopped off. He recovers her locket and, of course, hears her voice in his head telling him to kill them all because of what they did to her and for what they did to him.
Right.
Then we advance to modern day and a group of five hikers out near Crystal Lake. Soon find out they are looking for a legendary crop of weed that is supposed to be growing out there. And we can only assume that whomever the crop belonged to has long since been killed by Jason. The hikers get lost, and as they make camp, they eventually split up because, of course, that's what you do when you camp near Camp Crystal Lake.
Of course.
Uh, Whitney and her boyfriend go exploring and come across the old camp, Crystal Lake, and deciding not to mess with karma, they find a nearby house that doesn't belong to them and decide that they should go in there. Um, it becomes apparent real quick that this is the Voorhees home. So some hints to that are a collage of old camp counselor whistles, Mrs. Voorhees' locket, which Whitney puts on, and a shrine to Mrs. Voorhees, including her decomposing head.
All right.
I mean, that was kind of the final thing there. And so then Jason soon attacks and kills the boyfriend as Whitney runs off and returns to camp, only to find the rest of the group killed. And as Jason attacks her, the scene wipes and we get taken to another time skip. This time it is only 6 weeks in the future, and a group of college kids are headed to Trent's parents' cabin out on the lake. You immediately hate all of them as they stop for gas and
Oh, that is
supplies.
so accurate.
And Trent starts a fight with Clay, who is at the counter trying to see if the clerk will allow him to uh, hang up posters of his missing sister Whitney. Clay and Trent get into a dick measuring contest, which becomes a major theme of this movie.
Yeah.
Um, Jenna shows some compassion to Clay as she tries to get Trent to leave him alone. Clay leaves and continues to hit up everyone around Crystal Lake, asking if they have seen his sister, and is soon stopped by the police, who tells him he should search somewhere else because they have searched everywhere for his sister and she just isn't there. By the way, on the missing posters, it is Whitney. I don't know if I said that or not. From She was one of the five
Right. Right.
earlier hikers.
Yeah.
Um, Clay continues searching, and we meet a lovely old lady that might as well be the lady in the trailer park in Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake that warns him to leave, quote unquote, him alone because that is all, quote unquote, he wants. Clay, of course, doesn't understand the cryptic message,
Oh, look,
and
this movie had to have like we don't have a crazy Ralph, we have a crazy Rita, and
yeah,
so she had to warn you. It has a death curse in her own fashion.
death curse. Yeah. Um, Eventually, Clay ends up at Trent's cabin because, of course, he does, where he and Trent again measure their dick size. This time, Jenna leaves with Clay, and Trent is so broken up about his girlfriend leaving that he has sex with Bree. Clay and Jenna find the old camp as night settles in, and they are soon creeped out. And as they start to leave, they see Jason returning with a body draped over his shoulder. We can only assume that Jason is planning on eating the person later, because I don't know why else he would take the body. Um, and as they quickly uh, try to hide, they make one small blunder. They leave Clay's backpack in the open, which, of course, new and improved Jason finds. Jason pretends to have quit searching for them, and they make their escape back to the cabin to warn Jenna's friends and her asshole boyfriend. And as they escape, they set off the elaborate warning system that Jason has built underground around the camp. And we see that Whitney is still alive, being held captive by Jason because that's something he does now.
Yes, he
And,
does.
and we find out it is because she is wearing his mother's locket, and he is confused because in his mind she looks a bit like his mom, although not really. Um, Jason follows them back to the cabin, but somehow arrives before them and slowly starts killing off Jenna's friends. By the time Clay and Jenna actually get there, there are only three of her friends left alive: Lawrence and Bree and Trent, who are having sex, of course. And as they try to explain what is going on, Trent, barely having gotten dressed from his sexual escapades while Jenna was gone, accuses her of sleeping with Clay because he's, a good guy.
He's the best guy.
Yeah, the best boyfriend ever. So Clay and Trent again measure their dicks, while Jenna goes outside and gets. I'm sorry. While Lawrence goes outside and gets killed. Now that they finally believe Clay and Jenna, Jason kills Bree, and the cops show up, and he kills the cop. Then Trent, Clay, and Jenna try to escape into the woods, which is always the best place to run when Jason is after you. Trent is eventually killed and mounted on the back of a pickup truck that I think is driven by Crazy Ralph from the first
Uh,
original movies.
I
I
think
don't think it's
so.
the same guy, but it's a very much a nod to him.
Which there, are, yeah, which
Um,
we'll get into. There's several nods
there
throughout this
are,
film. Yeah,
um, and eventually, Jenna and Clay escape back to the Voorhees home because that's where I would run to if I was running from Jason. And eventually they hear Whitney screaming for help in the tunnels underneath the house. They free her just as Jason shows up and chases them through the tunnels. Poor Jenna never sees the outdoors again. Whitney and Trent, I'm sorry, Whitney and Clay finally escape but are forced to fight off Jason. Eventually, Whitney uses the tried and true method of pretending to be Pamela Voorhees and then stabs Jason in the chest with a machete while his head gets ground up in a wood chipper. The next morning, they decide to throw the body and the hockey mask and the locket into the bottom of the lake, and as Whitney sobs, Jason breaks through the dock, pulling her under. End credits.
yeah,
So there you have it, in the low down, dirty version of it.
yeah,
So yeah, you said there's quite a few nods to the originals.
yeah. There's some in
Uh,
there like that truck. Well, if I'm not mistaken, actually, Crazy Ralph, he had a bicycle, but that truck was, I believe, like, oh, I'm trying to remember the exact. It's one of the counselors. I think in like part four, like maybe three or four. But I believe that truck was like the model type was a reference to one of the older movies.
okay,
I think the big thing
gotcha.
about Crazy Ralph is he rode a bicycle all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just saying it was like Crazy Ralph because he looked like the same
Oh,
guy.
oh, I gotcha, I gotcha. But
Yeah, yeah.
I do believe a lot of the vehicles that are around the camp were like purposely made to look, or they got the same model type as some of the previous counselors. And
Yeah.
in the tunnels, you actually look very closely. You can actually see a wheelchair is
Yep.
purposely in there for the poor counselor who just already got bad legs and he takes it to the face down some steps. He just want to get one of our favorite
The kill
kills.
of the.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But
There
yeah,
was also a bike in the tunnels, which I'm sure was Crazy Ralph's.
oh, okay, okay. I didn't
Yeah.
catch that one. But there was that, and I want to say like, oh, you mentioned like the mom's shrine, and I think there even was her sweater was in there too.
Yep.
So that was
Yep.
all like little nods like that throughout. But this, like I said, it acknowledged, here's the weird part, which is again kind of like what I've said about, which we'll get into eventually, I assume, the Thing prequel slash remake. How
Yes.
they say they're gonna plan to remake it, but then they change it when they probably get negative press, or halfway through they realize they got a terrible remake. Because
Yeah.
this film is classified as a sequel.
Are
Kind of
you kidding me?
no. They claim that it's a direct sequel to the first one, kind of like how they just erased a lot of the middle, even though there's nods to them. And
Okay.
according to the scriptwriter, they said, or I think like the original scriptwriter of like the first movie, they had by calling it a sequel, not a remake, they didn't have to pay him as much.
Okay.
So
Okay.
like they're claiming this is a follow up to the original movie, and ignore I
So
guess
so
all
they
the
kind of
others.
pulled. Okay, so they pulled the Halloween and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and what a lot of these other ones are doing, where they
Yeah,
kind of do a reboot, leaving the very first one in play.
yeah, but doing it a lot not as gooder words, but not pulling it off as well as some of the others have done it.
Yeah,
Because this
yeah. I mean,
is
I can see that.
yeah, so technically that's what they're classified as. I don't think anyone else does, especially because there's no follow up plan. This is again, this is what now, 12 years old, 11 years old. I can't math, but
Yeah.
there's not going to be a follow up. If they do any more, it'll probably be yet another restart. So this is still considered a remake by the public, but like in production and for apparently money reasons, they call it a sequel.
See that actually changes it a bit for me
Right.
that that's what they were doing there.
Like whether that
So
was the original intention or not, that's what they're calling
yeah.
it.
Well, and I mean it makes sense with what they did in the movie. So I really don't have a problem with that.
No, no. Like
Um,
now, like knowing that too also made me kind of look at it in a different light, especially since they pretty much took a lot of different elements from like the first three or maybe even four films, and kind of
yeah,
put it into
absolutely.
this one.
Yeah, because he starts off wearing a mask that is similar to like the potato sack mask
Yeah,
that he wore in the second one. I mean,
yes,
it was just a wrapping, but it's similar.
yeah, single
Uh,
eye cloth wrap masks.
yeah,
Yeah, in which
yeah,
then we get the whole, he finds that hockey mask in the barn of the random rednecks he'd been stealing propane from, I guess, or something, for all these years
yeah,
to keep his tunnels and his his compound active, which is believable for like I said, this is living Jason again. This is pure human Jason.
yeah.
And you don't steal his weed. That's a big no no. He doesn't like that.
Yeah, apparently Jason's the weed grower. I don't know.
Well, actually, yeah. Again, not clear in this, but
Yeah.
what the writers and the producers have said about this film was they wanted Jason to be a hunter stalker. He
Well, they did that.
he planted weed to lure in dumb teenagers. He set up all this as like, I'm not going to come out there and kill randomly, but if you step on my territory, I'm going to kill you in the most vicious way possible.
Well, that makes sense, seeing that he had like the kind of alarm system
Yeah,
around the camp. Um, he really left other people alone
right.
that lived out there on the. I mean, because obviously Trent's family lived on the lake for quite a while.
Oh yeah.
Um,
So like,
so other people were living on the lake and weren't being bothered, but they just kind of left Crystal Lake alone, Camp
yeah.
Crystal Lake
And
alone.
and whether you like this interpretation of how of human Jason, that varies on, I guess, person to person. Well, I was also going to throw out there is that how you mentioned how we got one set of teens, and I say teens in parentheses because they're all in their
Yeah,
20s and 30s, but killed before we get the title screen. That's a 25-minute prologue. It's one of the longest in like film history in general.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they,
You got like a third of the movie
yeah.
before you even get into the movie.
But so yeah, so that was a thing they tried to do. But yeah, like
Yeah,
overall, that's really like a lot of my notes. Other than Jason,
yeah,
obviously you can. It kind of felt like he plans and sets all this stuff up, and he just has a ball when it finally gets to do all his plans come together. Because I mean that
well,
that sequence of just where he's just like stabbing up into the floor for like 5-10
yeah,
minutes solid.
yeah,
That's just a man who enjoys his work. To go through
yeah.
that much.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it. This is an all new type of Jason that we haven't seen before. Which, going off of the fact that this is a sequel to the first one,
Yeah.
would be fine because you would have to forget all of the other things. So in this one, he's a fast moving
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Jason. He's not the slow stalker that we've come to know and love. He will chase you down and run you down.
Yep.
He's much more creative in his kills. Um, he seems to show like more ability to reason and think. I feel
Yeah. Not
like you
quite
said, he's
the.
like a hunter stalker kind of person.
Yeah. Not so much kind of the simple simpleton kind of like they kind of always portrayed him. So it was very slow paced and deliberate kills. This guy like he does take pleasure in the hunt.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the kills in this is he takes one of the girls and ties her up in her sleeping bag and hangs it over a fire and lets her cook herself.
Yep.
Um, so this is as you said, this is a Jason that's enjoying what he's doing. He's not just a mindless killer, which is how he's kind of portrayed in the other movies.
Right.
Um, Also, apparently, he's an excellent marksman and I mean, axe thrower.
Well,
Yeah,
I chalk that up to the beauty of not having the internet. You have nothing better to do than hone your craft. Really.
yeah. And he's living on Camp Crystal Lake, so
Yeah.
he took advantage of all of the tools at the old camp. He was out at the archery range, shooting as often as he could with his brand new bow that obviously wasn't from the '80s, um, and practicing throwing his axe.
Yep.
I actually didn't mind this version of Jason once you kind of get past that it's not the Jason you expect.
Right.
Um, and if you can kind of turn that off, overall, this movie has quite a bit of tension and suspense in it. But it's also very much done. As you said, this was produced by Michael Bay,
Yeah.
who also produced the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remakes.
Yeah.
It
And
has
it.
very much the same feel as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Oh,
remakes.
I mean, and not just that. This feels like almost every mid 2000s horror movie that was coming out at the time, from like Wrong Turn, the remake of Hills Have Eyes, and again like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which not knowing that Michael Bay produced both and kind of at least his production company.
Right.
There was another note about that too. So get this. So this movie. I know I have the unrated version. I watched that on DVD, so I don't know how much was cut between like say the R rated and this one. I have the what's called
Right.
the killer cut. But so apparently during the premiere, and this is I assume the theatrical version, Michael Bay walked out of it stating there was way too much sex in this film. Michael Bay complained about over sexuality in a film.
Um, and as far as I remember, there's actually only two sex scenes in this
Right,
movie.
and I mean, there's plenty of boobs. I mean, you
Yeah.
get
Well, I
there
mean
is a lot of nudity in this film, but like, okay, Michael
that.
Bay's. So just because you imply it in all your films, doesn't I don't know. For me, that struck me as very strange. For Michael Bay, who literally just hired Megan Fox to be in 4 Transformer films just to film her ass from different angles.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just me.
Yeah, that's kind of the state of Hollywood in these times.
For
I
sure.
will say this about this movie is that you can definitely tell it was made in the 2000s because of the amount of violence that's in it.
No, for sure. Oh yeah,
Is, is
other
com-
little. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, especially compared to the other Friday the 13th movies, it really, really stepped up the violence.
Oh no, for sure. Lot of kills, a lot of blood, a lot of some digital, some stuff. I mean, I
Yeah,
understand they did. I did read that they tried to keep it as practical as they could, but there were just certain kills that were basically too dangerous for the actors, so they had to use like a CGI machete and stuff like that, where they
yeah,
just stuff like that. But to be expected of the era. Just another little
yeah.
funny side note because, like I said, he produced Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which features the other Winchester. I guess on their sabbatical, the two Winchester boys went after Jason and Leatherface on their own.
Oh, that's
In
hilarious.
my can, yeah, I can't. As much as I've watched Supernatural, I can never remember which one's Dean, which one's Sam. But
I can't either.
but the other Winchester boy is in that Texas Chainsaw remake, so it's like kind of funny. We
I
got
did
them.
not remember that, believe it or not.
I
I
pure
remembered that Jared Padalecki was in this one, but I did not remember that the other one's in the other.
Yeah, I had to. I read it on trivia because I didn't.
Oh,
It's been a long
nice.
time since I watched the Chainsaw Massacre one, but I thought that was also interesting. But I guess overall for me, the thing is like this is not a bad film. This is not like
It's
it's
not.
not as horrendous as another remake we're going to be talking about in the next series.
Yeah.
But for me, it's also very just middle of the road, especially for like
Yeah.
of its era. It didn't like there's a lot of kills, but to me, there's not like a whole lot of like unique kills. It is very much just a lot of Jason just run up and stabbing him in the head. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, fair. Um, I will say this that I really felt like, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, but I did feel probably a little bit more sucked into this movie than some of the other
Okay,
Friday the 13th movies as
right,
far as some of the tension and so forth. And it's not that I was scared for the people in the movie because I hated all of them,
right, right,
with the exception of Clay and Whitney and Jenna. The
right,
rest of them all could easily die, and I could care less, um, or could not care less.
right.
The but I did have I felt like they did a really good job of building suspense, And when I remember watching this in the theaters, and I know you said you didn't go to the theaters to watch
Yeah,
it,
no,
but
unfortunately, I didn't.
yeah, but I remember watching this in the theaters, and some of the things that bothered me a little bit, and maybe it's because of watching it in the time frame that I was watching it versus watching it now, but the underground tunnels and so forth seemed a little advanced for Jason. But then again, if you put that this isn't your Jason
Right,
out of your mind and watch it for what it is, it kind of makes sense that he would do that to be able to get all over that camp as he needed to from
right.
different angles, and especially since he's human and not supernatural in this movie.
Right, and it
Um,
was their way of being able to explain how Jason does, as we've addressed in previous films, where they just make it happen. That he seemingly just kind
yeah,
of appears out of nowhere behind people. Is that he's tunnel ratting. He's just going around there, which I don't know. Depending on how much of that, that's a big dude to be running around in some tunnels. But again, like he's had a lot of time to prep, and they've definitely established him as that planner, that hunter. So, like I said,
yeah,
how much you like it or don't, that as always, that's up to the individual. For me, it's still. I'm not gonna say it definitely did not ruin it. Like I know some people have said before how much they didn't like that aspect. They didn't like him being a thinking killer, and I don't. To me, I'm fine with that.
yeah. I mean, again, for me, I just had to turn off the in my mind. I had to flip that switch when I was
Right,
watching it this time, because it starts right from the very beginning. You know, not the flashback scene at the beginning,
right,
but the following scene. Where they're it's in 2009, and the kids. He's killing the kids that are
right,
out
right.
looking for the weed. You know immediately that this isn't your Jason. This isn't the Jason you've watched before.
No, yeah, for sure.
Um, I mean, he's got bear traps out for him. I mean, he's a different version. So once I flipped that switch, it made it a whole lot more enjoyable for me. Um, you know, uh, you talked about the kills, and honestly, there weren't a whole lot of like. It was kind of hard to come up with the best kill for this movie,
Yeah,
in my
because
opinion.
while there is a bunch of them, like, and you get kind of spoiled when you watch '80s horror, because
Right,
that the jam of '80s horror was they wanted to find as many unique ways to kill these teenagers and campers and whatnot
right,
off. And this one is more I say is arguably one of the more brutal like series of kills, but
right.
nothing that made a lot of them stand out. And like my pick was purely based on a chuckle for me, and it may be my. We'll get when I get into it. I'll bring that up. But I mean, you're gonna get your fair share of what we always said about horror movies: blood, guts, tits, and ass. And this movie delivers on all that.
Yeah, it definitely did. And again, I'm not going to complain too much about this movie. It's not my highest rated Friday the 13th movie, but overall, I'm good with it.
Yeah,
Um, I would have kind of liked to seen them carry on with it a little bit since they had reestablished that. My question is, and I don't know if you noticed this or knew this, but this was actually put out by both New Line Cinema and Paramount.
yeah,
Paramount, they did it together.
yeah. Which I had
Um,
forgotten until I popped it in. I noticed it, the dual thing. So I was like, that's interesting. Which I mean, I wonder.
and
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if they did that to use the name Friday the 13th.
I
You
think
know,
partially that, and something I just remembered I wrote down. I didn't write it down, but I just remembered reading the thing. There was talk of bringing in, because of this being like a sequel. Again, they kind of wanted to in the early drafts. They were, I guess, it was going to be a later sequel because they were talking about using Tommy Jarvis,
oh, okay.
which
Which seems to be who they always want to go back to,
right,
right? Is Tommy Jarvis.
right.
But my question then for them is, if you have the rights to both, since you've got Paramount back in on it, why didn't you just use the original ending scene from the first movie instead of reshooting it? And then you could have had Jason come up to his dead mother and do the same thing,
Right.
you know. That's that to me is where their whole thing of it falling apart. It kind of falls apart that they had always intended for this to be a sequel.
Yeah, which again, much like the thing, where they said it was going to be a remake, and the internet exploded with rage because you should never ever touch John Carpenter's The Thing. They were like, no,
Yeah,
no, 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 it's a prequel because it takes place, and it does take place in the thing before, except it literally does shot for shot every single sequence from the. So you could tell they changed, and I feel the same about this one. I feel like it
yeah,
originally started off as a complete remake. This was going to be their version. Nothing happened before it, and then I think they changed it. Now I give them credit that because I do remember when I first saw this, like they're acknowledging what I'd always thought about Jason watching his mother, even though she's claiming he drowned, is that she was
yep,
psychotic and wouldn't always acknowledge him or realize he's there. And still, whenever she had a
yep,
chance to kill, like she forgot and honestly thinks he's dead. So that gives a little
yep.
credence to my to what my theory about at least our own way of putting it all together. So yeah, but I don't believe this was always intended to be a sequel. I think that came about after several rewrites and people kind of like I think
Yeah.
going through the making of this personally.
So I wonder if it was lack of success or what that caused them to not continue along with this.
It did not do
Be-
well at the box office, and I don't. It was not well received upon coming out for sure.
because I want to say the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake actually was received pretty decently. Um, and they did a prequel to it
Right.
before they ditched it and went back to the original storyline.
Right. Well,
Um,
I think like a lot of the complaints were by this point we're used to undead Jason. We're not used to it was like you said this is not your daddy's Jason, and I remember kind of being just as guilty of that. I think the first time I
yeah,
watched it, I didn't hate it, but like it just didn't. It felt very as a Jason purist, and a super fan that I am, and while I'm not as mad at it anymore. But like this felt very, and especially reading it where they're now trying to claim it to be a sequel, some of the changes make a little sense. Even though
right.
again, I don't think that was ever the original intention. It feel compared to like say Texas Chainsaw, and maybe because I don't have as much of an attachment and Halloween, this felt very hollow at times. You know what I mean? Like, hey,
Yeah,
let's just we can do better. We had a popularity with because Freddy versus Jason came out before this, and I think that brought up a lot of hype for Jason again.
oh, and they were trying to capitalize on that.
I
Yeah,
think so. I think that's what. If I'm not mistaken about when these came out, I'm pretty sure this came out after the Versus movie. So I think they were trying to ride that wave, and it felt
yeah,
like, in my issues with it, the way I look at why I don't. I mean, I'm not giving it a super low score or anything, but it doesn't rank higher
yeah,
because a lot of it feels just very samey to a lot of the horror movies at the time. And as far as a remake, I don't feel a lot of the love. You know what I mean? Like this doesn't feel like a passion project. This feels like a marketing
right.
project.
Well, I will say this that Jason felt very much like Leatherface. The way he
Absolutely.
moves, the way I mean, now granted he's not cannibalizing the people. They're
Right.
not eating them.
That we know
But
of.
he that we know of, it doesn't show it. But
Right.
um Jason very much moves and acts like the Leatherface specifically from the remakes,
Right.
um, which is okay. It's just to me, I almost feel like they would have been better off never putting the hockey mask on him and calling this something else. Leave
Yeah.
him in the
Yeah.
other wrapping and calling it something else and starting a new franchise with it. They probably would have done fine. I think that they probably, because they wanted to tie it into Friday the 13th, um, I mean, now granted, if you'd watched this, and even if they changed the camp name and everything, you would have got enough of the connection to Friday the 13th to be
Right.
able to pull it off to know, hey, this is really a ripoff for Friday the 13th. But I almost feel like they would have been better just separating themselves from Friday
Yeah.
the 13th and starting their own deal versus trying to capitalize on the popularity of Friday the 13th.
No, I
Because,
100% agree with that. Sorry to jump
yeah,
in, but I was just going to say was like,
no,
there's a fine line between ripoff and homage, and
yeah,
I feel like this what had enough production level that if they hadn't called it Friday the 13th and just had a camp killer or a wood, in the woods killer, the weed
Yeah.
slayer, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I
Exactly.
I think it was done
Saturday the 14th or
right.
something.
I think
Yeah.
it would have been done well enough. People would have just like, okay, this is like obviously fans of Friday the 13th. I think it possibly would have been received more as you can tell these are fans of Jason and they made their own film as opposed to
Yeah.
just a. I'm not going to say watered down because, like I said, it was as brutal in its violence and delivering on all like the '80s level of like what we think of an '80s, even though this has way more of like the nudity and the violence and the chase and all that kind of stuff. But it just to me, and this is just maybe my old man side and stickler for like the horror that I grew up with and knowing, it just feels like a pale imitation at times.
I can totally see that, and part of that is probably tied into your love for Jason
Yeah. Oh,
and
I'm
for
sure.
these
I'm sure.
movies. Um, so yeah, kill count on this movie was low compared to some of the later Jason movies,
Right.
but high compared to some of the first couple. So
Right.
you had 12 kills by Jason. Pamela Voorhees gets killed in the opening, and Jason gets killed at the end, and potentially, Whitney, because we get left with that kind of, nod homage to the end of the first one where he busts up through the water and pulls her underwater.
Right.
So we don't know if she died or not. So um, yeah, I mean, but the kills were fast paced and some were better than others. But
Oh, for sure. For
what
sure.
what was your favorite kill, Sam?
Honest, my favorite kill was I don't know her name. She was the one doing the topless wakeboarding, where she was hiding under the dock, and
Yeah,
he stabs her through the dock, through the top of the head, and lifts her body up when he's pulling out the machete for one last little boob shot. Which just I don't know. So about her being lifted up and then slowly coming off the machete, it made me chuckle. That may be my own
yeah.
psychosis. I don't know, but that kill stood out just because it was a little different because like how he was stalking her on the shore for the longest, and then like she'd hide under there, and that had some good tension for me, as well as again the lift up after he's removing his machete.
All I can
That
think is
got it for
she
me.
was the stupidest person on the planet because she swam to the same side of the lake that he was on.
You're not wrong. But dumb
But
teenagers are his bread and butter, so I approved of
yeah,
that one.
my favorite was Amanda getting roasted alive in her sleeping bag, just
Yeah.
because it was something new and different.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
You got a little sleeping bag kills in this franchise, so I
yeah,
can see that one
yeah.
for sure.
Again, there really wasn't any that were like super stand off,
Right.
standoutish. The two that we mentioned, also Lawrence, the black guy, don't use stereotypes on me while I play every stereotype as a black guy.
Which, my God,
Yeah,
which that got so old so quick.
yeah. But his, like I said, you immediately hated everybody in the group,
Yeah.
from him saying, "Oh yeah, I have the only black guy in the group. Pump the gas." Yeah. Um, to the very end, but him getting hit in the back with the axe was pretty good too.
Oh,
Is
for
kind of
sure.
an honorable
And
mention. Jason throws that axe about 30 yards and hits him square in the back with it.
oh yeah, and while like I'm as as forgettable as it may be, because I can't remember how he went out. And now I'm forgetting his name. Who's the asshole, the dick measuring? Uh,
Oh, Trent.
Trent. That was a
Yeah,
satisfying.
his
I remember
was.
that being a satisfying death because out of a group of teenagers you absolutely don't like. He played the asshole role very well, so his death was very satisfying.
Well, and the good thing about that, the way that whole scene came, is he comes running out of the woods. Jason's chasing him,
Uh,
and he ends up on the road, and that truck pulls up, and it's like, wait, is that Jason driving the truck? Because you literally have no idea if Jason's capable of that or not in
right.
this series. Um, and so he's really tentative about walking up to this guy, and Jason, of course, just shows up behind him, stabs him, and then hangs him on the back of a pretty much a hay roller or a hay,
That's
the
right.
hay
Yeah.
carrier. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Uh,
see those around where we live all the time, where they carry the round bells,
right.
and he just impels him on that. And the dude's like, "I'm getting out of here," and drives off with this guy hanging off the back of his truck.
That's right. I couldn't remember the exact way it went down, but I just remember because it was him, it was a satisfying kill, and I gotta give him, you gotta give props when they truly make a hated character, which been a franchise staple. There's always that one
Yeah,
asshole or complete bitch of a character, and
yeah,
when they get it, it feels so good.
it does. All right, so here's the big question,
Yeah.
Sean. Where are you gonna rate this one?
As I said, while while I do feel it is very much a soulless film, it delivered on a lot of what I like in a horror movie. As stated, like I swear we're gonna get a T-shirt that says "blood, guts, tits, and ass" because that's that. So I can't hate it for that. And while I do feel like we had said, if it wasn't called Friday the 13th, I'd probably have a little rancor. But it is very middle of the road. So I do give it two and a
Yeah,
half stars.
you gave it 2.5, and I gave
Yep.
it 3, so we're not too far off.
Right. Right.
So that gives it a total of 5.5. So let's see where this puts everything
Woohoo!
in our rankings,
Yeah.
because we are now done. We have to give our listeners the rankings of the films.
Absolutely.
So, um, starting at number 10, I think we both agree absolutely the worst in the franchise was Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday,
Oh yes.
which we gave a combined score of 1.5.
The only one I said you can skip.
Yep. The next one did not get much better rating. And coming in at number 9 is, and I know you're saying, well, there's 11 movies. Well, that's because we have a tie. So coming in
Right.
at number 9 is Jason Takes Manhattan,
Oh, okay, okay.
with 2 total stars.
That's pretty fair. Pretty fair. like, well,
And then,
yeah, there's some memorable
go
moments,
ahead.
but overall, that one, like, just kind of a quick recap. Like, yeah, while there may be some memorable moments in that movie, that was just a garbage heap.
There you go. Um, Now they take a pretty strong jump from there
Hmm.
in our rankings. And coming in at number 8 was one that I know one of our buddies really loves, but you and I found it very middle of the road, and that was a new beginning, which is we gave a 4.5
The beginning,
to.
yeah, that that one is very like I said. There's a little something in almost every Jason movie, but yeah, that one. Who
It,
I'm going blank. Who's our buddy? Give him a shout out. Who liked the new beginning?
yeah, Brian loves that. Brian Stewart
Ah,
loves that movie. He thinks it's the best in the series. So,
you know what?
but
That doesn't surprise
yeah, me either. Okay, so the next two are where our tie happens. Um, 7A will be the movie we just spoke about,
me. Okay.
the 2019 version, at a 5.5 stars or 5.5 screams, and 7B coming in at the same rating is Jason X.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I mean,
So
I said what I said, but I'm really surprised I ranked them equally. But
yeah,
then again, looking back, like okay, like before we started this true analytical breakdown and discussion format that we made for these, there's no way I would have just like on a personal level done that. But yeah, okay, you can't argue with it.
it's yeah. That, and now, granted, this has both of our numbers in it, so
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. But that's funny though. It's just funny though. But again, yeah, you know what I mean through
because I
discussion.
know Jason X, you always talked about being one of your favorites, and now you've got the 2019 or the 2009 version right there with it.
Yeah,
So
no, it is what it is.
yeah.
As we always
So
say, though, like,
coming in,
sorry, one saying,
no, you're good.
but it's also true what we always say whenever like people post on like our Facebook or anywhere on there like your top five with your rankings. Well, it's going to change every year, but here it is, and that's reality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So,
Exactly. And this is based on us giving them analytical reviews and judging them as we went and not looking at the scores as we went, trying
true.
to put them in any order. We just rated them as we went. So
Oh yeah.
this is about as scientific as you're ever going to get
Right.
for two guys rating horror movies.
It's true.
Um, Coming in number six with six screams is Jason Lives.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So coming in number five with six and a half screams combined is part three. Coming
Wow.
in, yeah, coming in at number four with eight total screams is the original.
Yeah. At least
Coming
it
in,
made top five. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. Coming in number three, which I think if you had asked me at the beginning of all of this if it was my favorite or not, I probably would have said yes. Is part two with nine screams.
Bro. Wow. Yeah.
And then coming in at number two with 9.75 screams is the final chapter. And then, of course, what we both decided and both of us gave 5 stars to. No surprise if you've listened through this, is The New Blood.
Which crazy if like before really looking at it and just like going off memory. Uh,
Yeah,
like that's other than like I said, surprised where X fell in with the remake.
yeah.
I would have flipped those two in my. I would have sworn if you'd asked me like before all this, I would have put four ahead. But no, yeah, we you can't argue with
We
how
def,
as like yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I stand by my points. It's just kind of funny now looking back, like oh wow, yeah, I guess so.
I I think you actually rated both of them the same.
Ah, okay.
I think I was the deciding factor in that, which would make sense probably from your standpoint that they're probably a 1A and a 1B to you.
Okay,
And to
that
be
does
quite
make more
honest,
sense.
that's probably really where they are for both of
Right.
us.
Like any different any other week, you may have voted it, given it 1 point higher or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yep, yep. So there you have it, our very scientific rating of these movies. I think before we start the next, because our plan is to go on to A Nightmare on Elm Street
Right.
from here, so that we can work our way to the Versus film. Uh, but we had talked about doing 30 coins. Are you still on the table for that?
Yeah, I think so. I just we had talked about bringing in a guest, and now with the
Yeah.
new setup, I'm not as sure about that.
Well, you know
But
what?
yeah,
We can do 30 coins at any time. So why don't we just go ahead? We'll just make an executive decision. We're going to start with the Nightmare on Elm Street Part One next week. So
okay,
join us for that. And then when you get your office put back together and we can do it the way we want to do it, then we'll take a pause and do 30 coins, which
okay.
is a television show. Just a all of you should watch.
Oh
If
yeah,
you're listening to this, you should watch that. Um, we'll
yeah,
get into the pluses and minuses of it as we break it down. We're going to do all, I think it was 8 episodes. We'll do
yeah.
all eight in a one episode showing here. It
Yes.
may be a little bit longer than an hour. But yeah, we're going to break down all 8 episodes because it really is one big long horror movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if y'all enjoyed what you have heard over the course of this series as well as just this episode alone, give us a like, give us a comment. Do you agree with our rankings now that you've heard our, compiled rankings for this entire franchise versus, exception of the verses? Tell us how wrong we are. Tell us how right we are. Tell us if you're Brian Stewart and don't agree with any of this. But like, share, tell your friends, and get ready for some nightmares because we are coming after Freddy Krueger next. But that's going to do it for today. We will catch y'all later.
Thanks, guys.